Kuf Pei Zayin. That's what we're up to. This is a halacha which, I imagine that people in a different century would have found much easier to understand than I do. I'll just tell you where I had this problem the first time. I am from those people who daven in the Churva Shul. Any people ever daven in the Churva Shul? Okay, it's like a fascinating, wonderful experience. I do it to Rosh Chodesh, probably, or Hanukkah. I do it a good, probably 3 or 4 times a year. I daven in the Churva Shul. And I have a cousin who he's like very involved over there. And I told him once, I don't think you could be Yotzei Tkiyah Shofar in the shul. So, without missing a beat, he says, it's not exactly like it used to be. I said, you mean it used to be that you were able to be Yotzei? He said, I think so. But I agree with you, I'm not sure that you could be Yotzei. Now, the subject that I'm talking about is what's called in English an echo. You daven in the Churva Shul, it resonates the sound. You know what I'm talking about? So, in order to be Yotzei, you have to be hearing, I don't know the words that you used, the direct sound, not the secondary sound. Hello, 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 right? That we know that's called an echo. But even when you're in a place that is contained and the walls bounce off sound, it's not clear always that you're hearing the sound of the shofar. And this bothered me very much until I found out that the edifice that there is today, the ceiling is different than it used to be. And therefore it may very well have been that in the original structure there wasn't this problem, and nowadays there is. Now, since I've learned this halacha many years ago, I've noticed certain things which are amazing. If you go into a dira that has no furniture in there and you talk, and you go into a dira that has furniture and you talk, the same dira, it sounds different. Why is that? Because the sound is bouncing off of various items, and that takes away from the echo aspect. Okay? These are scientific facts which I guess you pick up with experience of life. And this is the subject which we're going to discuss. I will just say that the modern poskim are busy with this question of when is it that you call it that you're hearing the secondary sound, and when is it that you're not. Probably the most interesting experience that I could think of that has to do with this idea is a person would go to a baseball game and hear the batter hit the ball. You hear it if you're sitting, depends where you're sitting in the stands, you hear it much later than you actually see it, but you hear the sound. If it's a stadium with a dome, then it works differently. These are like things that, so you have to know when is it that you're hearing the sound of the shofar, and when is you're hearing it something secondary. Shimon, you know what we're talking about?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, without speaking, how come a person can make bracha on thunder then? Isn't the only way to...
On what?
On thunder, when you hear thunder, the blessing on thunder.
Yeah.
Isn't the doubt you're hearing it echoing off some building or something like that, you're not hearing the actual blast of the thunder? You don't have such a subject to it?
I don't know. I don't even know why I would think that. The thunder that you're hearing is in an open expanse, right? It's not in a closed place.
No, but you're in your house and you hear it outside, you make bracha.
The sound is, like the cases that we're speaking about, is let's say a person is blowing a shofar inside a building and you're hearing it outside, or inside a pit and you're hearing it outside. if you're hearing it in the same mitzias, I don't know the right word to use, then it was being said, then the sound was created. Generally, there will not be that sound. Now, when you're talking about thunder, something which is, let's just talk about thunder, the rambling of thunder. Okay? What is that? Scientifically, what is that? No, I didn't ask you what causes it. Are you hearing thunder or are you hearing something else?
That's really my question.
No, I said the rambling of thunder. I didn't say when you hear thunder.
What do you mean by rambling?
There is like what?
Rumbling?
Yeah, that rumbling of thunder is regular thunder. It's just like if you would be in Colombia, there would be an earthquake, and then there would be secondary earthquakes. So a lot of times there are things that happen that cause something secondary to happen, and if you're not aware of what's going on, you may think that you're just hearing some kind of an echo of the first thing.
Right.
Now, as far as I'm concerned, the thunder that person hears is pretty loud and clear that you're hearing the thing itself. I wouldn't fathom that it would be any way otherwise, especially since the sound that you're hearing is so strong. It's hard to believe that that would be a secondary sound. You know, I don't know how outdoorsy you people are, but if you ever go into a ravine and you throw a stone into the water and you hear the echo, you know what I'm talking about? You can hear that what you're hearing is an echo. It's clear, right? And, you hear the initial sound, and then you hear the echo. When you hear something which is very strong, generally that doesn't happen. That's how I would imagine the answer to the thunder is. Okay? Now, but the subject is a very important subject. I'm just pointing out that, you have to be careful that you're actually hearing the sound. Now, I don't know if they brought Rabbi Nebenzal to the Churba Shul to have him paskin on this question, but I realized afterwards that I wasn't the first one to have the question. You understand? So we don't have that question here in Shul. Here in the Shul, you hear what you hear the real thing. That's all. We'll soon see about people outside the Shul, and that's also a subject which needs to be discussed. Hatokea b'seich habar or b'seich ham'ara. If you're blowing a shofar inside an enclosed area, whether it's a pit or a cave, oisam ha'oimdim b'seich habar ham'ara, those that are standing inside that enclosed area, yotzu, they're yotza. V'ha'oimdim b'chutz, and the people that are standing outside, im kol shofar shamu yotzu. If the sound that they heard was the call of the shofar, they're yotza. V'im kol havara shamu, and if they heard the secondary sound, lo yotza. Now, how would you understand this scientifically? If you're in the same place, that's clear that you're hearing it at the same time. Now, even though I just said you could be in the same place and still be hearing a echo, but the pashtus is if you're hearing it without having any kind of interference, it's understood that you're hearing the same thing. If you're hearing it in a different sector where the sound had to travel, so then we're worried about when it traveled, it didn't travel straight, it changed what it is, and that would be a kol havor, and you wouldn't be yaitza. Okay. I didn't say that. I think that your question is way off base, and I'll explain to you why. A person is wearing a hearing aid, is not hearing at all what was said. What happens is, I'll just tell you, a hearing aid and a microphone is the same thing. Okay? And for those, I haven't been involved in the subject of hearing aids recently, because the proliferation and advancement in hearing aids in the last decade is probably 100 times more than it was from 100 years ago until 10 years ago. And the reason for this is very simple. Bluetooth and cell phones, right? Those people who wear that earring, that earring, that have that hook in their ears all the time, that is basically the same thing as a hearing aid. Now, anybody who is on their phone, the sound has to be perfect, better than the Eibishter can make it, and therefore science is very big into technology for hearing aids, because that's exactly the same technology, and we've made major advancements. Not only that, there's been a deregularization in the United States about who can sell hearing aids, and you can buy today on Amazon hearing aids that are pretty reasonable. I'm talking about as far as the quality of sound compared to the super professional ones, for a fourth of the price of the professional ones. We make major advancements, and basically it's the same thing as a telephone. They take the sound, they transfer it into some other kind of electronic impulses, and then they recreate it on the other side. Now, does that have anything to do with echoes?
But in the sense that they're not able to hear the original sound. They're hearing
something different, but they're not hearing an echo.
Right. I mean, if the reason why they're not hearing...
What they're hearing recreated is the original sound, perhaps.
So in that sense, it could be better than an echo.
That's correct. That could be better than an echo.
I didn't realize
That's Moshe Feinstein and others were the opinion that you could be Yotze theoretically on a telephone. And this is just... well, you can't hear Shofar on the phone because on Shabbos we don't... well, they're speaking about Havdalah. Okay. What? Live Havdalah, yes. That he has a tshuva about it, and he's pretty much noted that you're Yotze, and many other poskim agree with him. And I'll just tell you, here is where the difference, what I call, between the halachis and the lamdanim exist. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach has a immensely long tshuva to explain how you cannot be Yotze anything on a telephone or with a microphone or anything like that, because you're not hearing the original sound. And he is someplace where you are. And the Chazon Ish, the Igros Moshe, they held that you could be Yotze because the way, I'm going to say this as an American, you call them as you see them. I don't know if you know what that term means. What? Okay, you know what it means?
It's like, if it sounds like it, is it?
Right. In other words, it doesn't have to be. But if it's understood and perceived that way, then we say that it is. So even though they may agree with what Shlomo Zalman says, their opinion is the exact opposite. And this is a fascinating machlokes. I don't really want to get involved in it. I'll just tell you from the fascinating stories. I was at a chasna together with Rabbi Avrohom. Now, Rabbi Avrohom is Rav Shlomo Zalman's son, and he also happens to be the son-in-law of Rabbi Elyashiv. And Rabbi Elyashiv wasn't so much on Rav Shlomo Zalman's side on the subject of the microphones. And I was at this chasna, and it was clear to me that they're going to call him up to give him a bracha. And at this chasna, they were using the microphone for Sheva brachas. So I said to the guy standing next to me, who was a friend of mine, I say, let's see what he's going to do. Because there's no way that he's going to use the microphone, and there's no way that he's going to embarrass the guy who's... So how is he going to get out of this predicament? And Mamish, it couldn't have been better. They called him up for bracha achriti. And he walks up there, and the guy shoves the microphone in his face. He takes the microphone, looks at it, and says, I don't need this. He puts it down and makes the bracha with a very loud, distinguished voice. And anybody who wouldn't have known that something was happening wouldn't have known something happened. But I just happen to have known in advance that I'm about to see something happen. And therefore, you just have to know. Now, this is a very interesting machlokes. And I'm sure you people have been by all kinds of chasnas where nobody can hear anything, everybody can hear. It's like, I'm not going to get involved in this subject. I'm just telling you that there is a subject about it. And, all right, let's go weiter. Okay. The halacha in the Mechaber is extremely simple. Figure out what you heard, and you'll know if you're yaitza. That's like, you can't argue with that too much. Okay. No. I'm going to start with Sifkat and Beis. Who I did Martef means a basement. The guy gavda mokum shutachas akarka shekol hatkia misorev im kol havara ha'oimdim bachutz. Ubinyan sherubo ala karka umiksasu b'soich habor karka shori. The al yidei sherubo lamayla min akarka lo mizbalba kol v'nishma kol ha-shofar af lo oimdim bachutz. V'vayim bir halacha. What we wrote about this, and he has a very long bir halacha, gets involved in how do we decide what you're hearing. B'dv'soich habor gufa eno shomea kol havara. V'lav davka imkol gufam babor, el afilu chnisu rak roishon labor sagi, as long as their ears are inside the bar, where your hearing apparatus heard, it's in the same domain as the sound, we'll say that you heard this, the shofar. Ha'oimdim bachutz, wherever your head is, that's where it counts, because that's where your ears are. Yotzu, in order to be yaitza, you have to have that the person who's blowing the shofar had the mind to be yaitza. Now this is a very important halacha, and I'm just going to share with you this episode because mipam lapam, I get what I call people who have religious fervor ask me questions that are totally unfounded, and they can't understand what I'm talking about. So I've had, probably about 3 months ago, someone came over to me and I said, I'm at my grandfather's house here on Rehov Lachish, and he makes kiddush. I don't think he has everybody in mind in my yaitza. Okay? Now, what is behind this guy's question? Why would you say a guy who's making kiddush doesn't have everybody in mind? Why would you say he has everybody in mind? I don't know which way you want to ask the question. But I'll just start off with a fascinating story that happened to me. I was in Lakewood probably about 10 years ago, so basically by the end of my father's life, and he was making kiddush and being mitzi everybody. Now, that's for the Stam people. My brother-in-law, whose house he was in, he makes kiddush himself, and all of his kids make kiddush. But there must have been like 30 people there or something like that. And he made kiddush. I was sitting next to him, and I took the becher from him, and I was going to take some for myself. My father stops me, and he says, I didn't have you in mind. And so I gave the wine out to everybody else, and then I had a whole discussion with my father. And what became apparent in that conversation is something which is not apparent, I don't think, to most people over here. My father said, I took a look around the room, and I had all the people that I thought wanted to be yaitza in mind. And I thought you were going to make kiddush yourself, so I didn't have you in mind. Now, when I make kiddush, that's not what I do. I have a mind to be mitzi anybody who wants to be yaitza, right? Okay? Now, I'm not right now getting involved in what's the better thing to do. If you have a mind to be yaitza everybody, you're mitzi everybody. In my opinion, the grandfather is making kiddush. He knows people want to be yaitza. He has a mind to be mitzi anybody. He's not like my father that has in mind Reuven and Shimon, Levi and Yehuda, and not Yisachar, but Zvul and Yes. You know what I mean? Now, a person who's blowing the shofar, who does he have in mind to be mitzi? Now I'm going to tell you where this is nageya. This is nageya, like I have a brother-in-law, he goes to the hospital on Rosh Hashanah and he blows shofar for people in the hospital. So he goes into room 101 and he blows shofar for those people. The people in the room 102, were they Yaitza?
They heard it like without, if he intends to see everyone that hears the shofar is in the next room, then he goes say, if he only intended to...
Right, so now I asked you, so what happened?
It depends on his intention, no?
So the halacha is that a person who's a shliach tzibur, we say a shliach tzibur, he has in mind to be mitzi anybody that could hear it. If you're not a shliach tzibur, we assume that you have to have the people in mind. So I would say the people in room 102 are not Yaitza, unless he makes a statement that I'm having in mind to be mitzi all the people.
So for example, when the shofar is being blown here, by the designated person in Rosh Hashanah, and we live behind the shul, and my wife comes out and stands on the balcony, and she hears the shofar being blown here, she can have kavana, which is covered by it, because it's a shliach stick.
That's 100% true. However, as we will soon see, she has a question, did she hear the call of the shofar or the call havara? Because when you're far away, then we're going to see that could be you hearing the call havara. I don't know where you live exactly, I'm asking. Okay, you're like mamish the building over here?
Yes, like we look down.
And you see the shul. Yes. You're looking directly down. I would say you're Yaitza, yeah.
Especially since with the ladies, kind of, not really appeal, kind of minhag.
Yeah, okay. Well, just saying, but this is a important idea. And the Shliach Tzibur has mind to be Yaitza everybody. Pirishim kol ha-shofar, okay. Lo yatzukaz apoin desiva sadavar tali ba'oimek habar or berichok hamakom, whether how deep the bar is or how far away you are. V'chol adam yesh biyado lahavchin lahaker im kol shofar shama b'chud or me'ura b'kol havara. You have to figure this out by yourself. V'yesh omrim oid da'afilu atokeh b'beis hakneses v'yesh omrim chutz k'tzas rachok mimeno shaykh b'zeh gam ken hab'chila lefi richok b'beis hakneses. This is what I mentioned to you about your wife. Do you have to be chayshish that she didn't hear the whole thing? I don't think you have to be chayshish. V'yesh mishamachma v'omer shelo chutz tamid nishma kol havara v'yesh lachosh l'deyazu shaloi b'shas hatchak l'tkoya odapam. Now, I would just like to share with you from the issues that exist. This shul is not so bad because we blow shofar many times. If you didn't catch it the first time, the second time, the third time, the fourth time, I think like 6 times that the shofar is blown on Rosh Hashanah here. Okay? There are, in many shuls, there are women that hang out outside the windows of the shul to hear the shofar. What are they hearing? In my opinion, I would say they're all hearing kol shofar and there's no problem. But Mishnah Berurah just bring up this idea that you have to know what it is exactly that you're hearing. Okay. It's not significant at all. It's just like if you took a lulav and esrog without a bracha. You're yaitz 100%. You just must start on the mitzvah of making a bracha. That's all. Okay. I know it's important they make a bracha, but that's not. This is very important. Somebody who came in and they already made the brachas, they should just listen to the Tkiyah Shofar without the brachas. Okay. If a person started to blow the shofar when he was in the bar, and while he was blowing, he came out of the bar. You heard it always, the original call. They were yaitza and they heard the right thing, and there's no problem. Okay. Now I'm going to go to the next halacha. Hashomea mixas k'tiyah shaloi b'chiyuv, u'mixasa b'chiyuv. You heard part of the shofar in a situation where you're mechuyev and part not. Or Omar Latakea b'misase kaven otzeni dechavasi, or a guy was blowing and you said in the middle, b'maitzimi. So the beginning of his tkiya, he didn't have you in mind, and then he put you into his mind in the middle of blowing. V'tako mashach bo shir tkiya, and he blew enough for you to be yaitza. Lo yotza. You're not yaitza. Why? Because you didn't have him have in mind to be made to you the entire time. V'yesh oimrim sheyotza. If you heard enough for a shir tkiya. Who didn't show mixas atkiya b'kol avor. You're going to show atkiya b'abor. Who oimir b'chutz u'be'emtz atkiya yotza l'chutz. The same question if you're yaitza. Okay. Now, okay. I would like to read the Mishnah Berurah Yudalid because this Mishnah Berurah Yudalid is very nageh halacha l'maisa. Lo yotza sharei al kaponim chosa lo yatzcholas atchiyah. He's missing the beginning of the tchiyah that the person didn't have a mind to miyotze him. V'uadin namim hayat tchiyah haya b'chiyov elashu nichnas be'emtza tchiyah, and you only heard the middle. Osh hay b'beis hakneses be'emtza tchiyah v'shuv lo shama lo yotza. V'af al pi shayashir tchiyah b'masha shama. Even though you heard enough. Command the shama chatzi shir tkiya dami. Now this is something which in this shul I used to have a problem with. I think nowadays we've more or less overcome the problem. The person who blows the shofar without getting involved in brisker chumas. I'm not talking about practical, simple halachos. If a person blows a shofar like this, ooh, are you yaitza? 100% yaitza. The problem is, if a person blows a shofar, ooh, the person who's standing in the end of that room in the back, did they hear the beginning? You understand what I'm talking about? Okay, the person who starts blowing, his decibel level, if it's not at high level, it gets louder. So the person who's very far away, he may not have heard the beginning of the tkiya. He heard a shir tkiya, but he didn't hear the beginning of a tkiya. And according to this opinion here in Shulchan Aruch, that person wasn't yaitza. So because of that, I'm always very machmer that the person who's blowing has to be a very strong kol from the beginning until the end of the kol. And if he blows it in a way that the decibel level increases as he's going, I will make him blow it again. And I have had people come over and say, why make him blow it again? It was 100% okay. And I say, it was 100% okay to you. But I have no idea if it was 100% okay for, all the people what? Right. Okay, and this is a very important nakuda, and all right, you have to. No, you made up a Gemara. There's no such Gemara. Wait, they did what? Yeah, and what did they do? They waved a flag to answer Amen. Nothing to do with Tkiyah Shofar.
No, but how could the Tkiyah Shofar someone standing in the back of the tree? I
didn't say that in Alexandria Tkiyah Shofar, right? There's a question about what you need to answer Amen and what you need to be a Tkiyah Shofar. Those two halachas are not the same thing.
So you could hear Tkiyah Shofar.
No, I didn't say that. I said if you couldn't hear the bracha, you could still maybe answer Amen. But if you didn't hear Tkiyah Shofar, you're not Yotza. Right? So you can't compare, these are two totally different subjects, you know what I mean? So you can't really compare them.
I was just thinking about what I was saying about the Shofar got to be strong in the beginning. So I was thinking that a huge shoe like that, the people in the back.
Yeah, well, that's true. The people in the back, you have to have somebody else blowing for them, or the guy had to blow it very strong. I could just tell you, I don't I'll just tell you these are facts. The Ben Ish Chai did not live such a long time ago. The Ben Ish Chai lived 125 years ago, or so. It's not, he didn't live a long time, and he would give a shir on Shabbos to over 2,000 people, and all of them heard every word. Now, these are people that have, I've heard from people who heard from people that were there. You know what I mean? This is not like, so I don't know exactly how that's done, but it can be done. All right. Okay, we're going to the next siman. Zman Tkiya Shofar. When is the Zman Tkiya Shofar? Zman Tkiya Shofar bayom u'v'loi balayla. Now, why is this? This is learned from a pasuk, because it says Yom Trua. Bayom u'v'loi u'mitzmasai, and the proper time to do it is Minei Tzachama v'elach. Like all many halachas, that Meikar Adin is from Halachas Shachar, but from Netzacham is we'll try to do L'chatchila, so people shouldn't make any mistakes. Alright. Now, Vim Shama mixas Tkiya Kodem Al Shalamur HaShachar, mixas Ach Shalamur HaShachar, Lo Yotza, as we spoke about beforehand. I would just like to share with you an important idea. When is Halachas HaShachar exactly? What is Halachas HaShachar is a very big machlokes poskim. We're not going to get involved in that. Okay. If you heard in the daytime enough then to share Tkiya, then it has to do with the subject of Mishnah Berurah, which we spoke about beforehand. Okay. Next halacha. Shama Tesha Tkiyas B'Tesha Shos Bayom Yotza. If you heard the 9 sounds of the shofar spread out throughout the day, you're Yotza. Now, there's some conditions to that, but the halacha is that they do not have to be heard in one shot. V'afilu hemitisha b'nei adam, taka mizeh, trua mizeh, v'tkiya mizeh. You heard from different people. V'yesh amar dafel shlo hisik b'neihem b'kol shofar she'en roi ba'oisa bama. You didn't have a kol shofar which was not appropriate in that place. And this is where, when blowing the shofar, the questions get complicated of when do you have the person go back and start the whole row again, and when do you have him continue, just fix his mistake, and we'll learn a little bit more about that later on. But that's the halacha over here. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah, Naka Lisha de Gemara, V'inan Davka Tisha Koilois. Okay, Yotza de B'diyeved in Kivin Motzes. V'afilu esiach daita b'hisig v'dir b'neim. Even if a person spoke in the middle, because of Magen the kol zek b'shesha b'neihem shaloi machmas oynis. Ha k'shahaya shah b'oynis. Oshaya afilu k'dei ligmor kol ha-seder. Yachzel l'rosh ha-seder. The Ramah says later on. You have to look and go back to see other halachas. When do you have to make a bracha again? Okay. Davka b'shaloi hifsik. If you did a wrong sound of the shofar, that's worse than talking about the soccer game or something like that, because this is what's called minoi machrif. You're doing something which has to do with the subject, and you're doing it wrong, that affects it negatively. You have to have a tkiyah. You ruin that whole seder you're doing. Even if you weren't the one who blew that sound, if you had in mind to be yotza a inappropriate kol shofar, it knocks you out and you have to hear that whole seder again. Batul kol ha-shofar tkiyos, you lose that whole thing. Mikol makom yesh kodesh mikodem shalei batul v'yachzu yitzka mikol makom lo yivarach shuv. Now, I'd just like to share with you, I used to live in Ezes Torah, and there were 3 or 4 shuls, like in one mitcham. And a lot of times, you would be blowing shofar, and you can hear the shofar blowing in the next shul. And this becomes a question of maybe it's being makalkal your seder. Now, if you have in mind that you don't want to be yaitza with that kol, so the Mishnah Berurah just said that it's only a problem if you're having in mind to be yaitza. So, but aside from the halachic problem, there's a problem that when you hear that other sound of the shofar, it's mafriya you. You know, you can't concentrate when you're hearing very different things, and therefore they would try to synchronize that none of the Tkiyas shofar should be exactly at the same time, although it never worked out because of Chazoros Hashatz, there was always a problem, okay? But I'm saying, at least in theory, they try to work out this issue, which is a serious issue. Okay. Kigon sha'amah b'tashat v'shama truo, sha'amah b'tarat v'shama shvarim, avachorim eskim delfi psak hamachav v'lakamon, afilu hichpilu hashvarim o truo shtei pamim havi hefsek. V'adin hacha b'shama shnei shvarim o shnei truo zeh achar zeh, v'chiven lotzes, you have a problem. Gam ke'masi kol shal shkusha v'tzarech l'tkva mechodesh. This is very important that you should be listening to whatever you have to be hearing at the Tkiyas shofar. Shama Teisha Tkiyas v'tisha b'nei Adam, she'tagol kulam ka'echad. Lo yatsa. If you hear everybody blowing at the same time, you're not yatsa. She'en kam pshuta lefanel, pshuta la'acharel. You don't have the right order. V'im shnaim tagol ka'echad kol ha'seder, afil echad tagol b'chatzois is yatsa, d'yov daita kol shofar. This is based on a Gemara that it's chaviva, and you'll be yatsa. Okay? Haya zet tzarech pshuta. One person needed the pshuta rishayna, zet tzarech pshuta achrayna, and another person needed the pshuta achrayna after the tekiyas, and you have a guy below. Can two people be yaitza two different things? Tekiya achas motzi shteihem, because each one is using it for their own purpose, and that is okay. Okay. Okay, and there's a discussion about this. How long did it have to be that tekiya was going for? Was it going for a long enough time or not? Okay, I'm going to go to the next halacha. Yom Tov shel Rosh Hashanah shechal yos b'Shabbos. That's this year, right? Okay. Ein toikim b'shofar. We don't blow shofar on Shabbos. And v'osel taltaloi, and it's muksa. Im loy litzarech gufoi mekoymoi, unless it's tzarech gufoi mekoymoi, because otherwise it's considered muksa. Now this is a serious issue, and I'm not even going to get involved in the particulars of it. I'm just going to ask you a question that the Achrayim asked. The Poskim seem to say that your lulav, where after the person was makayim the mitzvahs lulav, it becomes muksa machas gufay. And the shofar is called the klisha malachta le'isr. And the question is, what's the difference between a lulav? Why is a lulav called muksa machas gufay? Something which has absolutely no use. And the shofar is called the klisha malachta le'isr. Now I'm just going to share with you the basic understanding of the two things and the I think the simple answer to this question. This item over here, is this called the klisha malachta le'isr, or is this called muksa machas gufay? This item, I don't think that there's any use for it that people use it for on Shabbos. What? Okay. If you use it as an alarm clock, then that could be. But that's also not so clear whether you could move it afterwards. Okay, just going to the Nakuda, which I'd like to discuss. The Morvik discusses the question of if a person has a ner. A ner is something that I don't think a ner has any other use besides to use it as a ner. And therefore he suggests that it has a din of muksa machmas gufa. Kli shamalachta le'isr is a kli which is used for isr, but theoretically it could have a use of heter. And I'll give you an example of such a thing. Such a thing would be, in my opinion, like a pen or a pencil. Generally, pens and pencils are used to write with, But if I want to point to something, I'll use my pen or pencil, and that's 100% permissible to be done. That's called a secondary use. That's not like, that's not how we use a pen and pencil, but if I need, I will use it. So that's enough that it could have the halachic status on Shabbos of a kli shemalachta le'isr. And therefore, I'm just going to share with you a fascinating halacha. If I were to come into shul on Shabbos, and I would see somebody who has a pen in their pocket, on Shabbos, Friday night, the guy comes by me and he has a pen in his pocket. What should I tell him? I should tell him nothing, because that's tchilas tiltulo beheter. It's a kli shemalachta le'isr. Better leave it in your pocket till you take off your shirt at night. To take out the pen is a problem. Okay? If I saw a person that had a shekel or a dollar bill in their pocket, I would tell them, shake it out, go to the corner and shake it out. Because you don't say tchilas tiltulo beheter would allow you on something which is muksum al machas gufay. So these are very important halachas you have to understand. Now a shofar in the olden times, I know it sounds funny, they used to use it as a baby bottle. They would use it for all different kinds of things, and therefore it was called the kli shemalachta le'isr. Whereas a lulav, as far as I know, a lulav was never used for anything, and therefore it would have a halacha according to many achronim of muksum machas gufay, and it would be usher to be metaltal it altogether. Okay, we'll stop over here.